The time is 51 minutes past the hour, and we're going to close this programme talking about this that happened this week. The pilots of a Japanese airliner that collided with a smaller plane this week at Tokyo Airport were initially unaware that their jet was on fire. A Japan Airlines spokesperson told the BBC it was a flight attendant who informed them of the cabin fire. After that, the process of getting all 379 people off Japan Airlines Flight 516 proceeded with life-saving precision. The aircraft's announcement system was damaged, apparently, leaving the crew to use their own voices to shout instructions. Japanese media described the evacuation as a miraculous 18 minutes. Passengers left their hand luggage behind, dashed to emergency exits, and slid out of the aircraft before it was engulfed in flames. Let's talk now to Becky Rutherford, who joins us. She was senior cabin crew for 10 years with British Airways and currently works at SkyPeople Training as a lead training instructor. Were you impressed, Becky, by the images you saw from Japan this week?
Hi, good morning. Yes, very impressed with how the cabin crew reacted.
It must have been a textbook case, was it? Talk us through it a bit.
I think it's difficult to say that anything is textbook when there's any kind of an emergency on an aircraft, because it's impossible to actually predict what could happen whenever there is any kind of an emergency. The fact that it's been reported that the cabin crew were the people that alerted the flight crew to the fire within the cabin or the smoke within the cabin is not necessarily unusual. The flight crew will be at the nose of the aircraft. They won't necessarily have visibility or indication of what's going on in the cabin. And it is the cabin crew's job to stay alert to that, assess the situation, and make sure that the flight crew are advised of it.
I imagine it was very important that the passengers heeded instructions not to open the overhead lockers and rummage for their important baggage so they could save it from the fire. Would you expect passengers on a plane to obey that instruction? I'm impressed they did.
I'm incredibly impressed by that. I think it is, or we can make an assumption to an extent that some of that is cultural. I think if the event had happened on another airline in another country...
You mean because they were mostly Japanese?
Well, we can assume that they're mostly Japanese because it was an internal flight. I've done many flights to Japan, and the passengers do tend to give an awful lot of reverence to the cabin crew. They respect the role very much. And as part of their culture, they do tend to respect roles. So therefore, it appears that they listen to the cabin crew, and from videos that I've seen, appeared reasonably calm and did adhere to what they were told to do. And I think that has made a huge impact on how safely the aircraft was evacuated.
Have you got experience of passengers disobeying such an instruction?
I've never done an evacuation myself, but it is difficult for passengers, for cabin crew to get passengers to do what it is that you want them to do.
People would have their passports, their wallets, things that are important to them in those overhead lockers, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would do. I mean, you could only look at the BA 2276, which was in 2005, which was an engine fire in Las Vegas. And you can see from the videos there was a tremendous amount of luggage that was taken off with them. Passengers are in a state of shock. They will go for what they think is important to them. And in this instance, that didn't happen. They listened to the commands and they did what they were told.
You train cabin crew. What do you look for in an ideal candidate?
Well, from a training perspective, we're not really looking for those kind of things. That's been done in the recruitment process. But what we are definitely looking to train them is a solid understanding of what standard operating procedures are for that individual airline. So those are the basic things like the actual drill to open the door, which will be a very simple process of ABC. What we need to interweave into the training, and is the more complex thing, is the human factors element, which is managing your surprise and your startle, managing your emotions, thinking about assessing the situation, maybe deviating from a standard operating procedure if that is what is needed on the day. So in this example, I believe that the interphones weren't working, so they had to find an alternative way to communicate. They were in a smoke-filled cabin, so again, they had to find a way to communicate within smoke, which is obviously going to affect your voice very much. And also they had to find a way to communicate with the flight crew to let them know what was going on. So it's kind of the additional things, the thinking outside of the box, the human factors that you have to interweave into building a base knowledge of an actual drill.
It's the most important part of a job, really. It eclipses how well you serve gin and tonics to people in first class.
Yeah, that's not what the job is about. 70 to 90, maybe 99% of the job is that, but there is always at the back of the mind the mental model that something can go wrong, and what do we do, and having the alertness to know that something could always possibly change.
Is there sexism still in the way that flying passengers view cabin crew in terms of the authority that they're afforded, given that most cabin crew are still female, or are they? Have I got that simply out of date?
I would say that's pretty out of date. It's very difficult to say. It's different in different cultures. It's different in different airlines. It's not something that I ever experienced. I flew for 17 years, 10 of that as a senior, and it was not something I ever experienced.
Becky Rutherford, who is cabin crew, senior cabin crew with British Airways, and now works training cabin crew. Many thanks for your take on what happened in Japan. What's your take, Arzu, when you saw those pictures of a plane being completely engulfed and finding out that nobody had been killed? What a relief.
I mean, what a relief for sure. Definitely kudos to the cabin crew for handling that. But I think, just hearing your guests talk about the preparedness, I also thought of preparedness of passengers, or lack thereof, because while the cabin crew always is knowledgeable about how to react, how to respond, the passengers are not. And they often could cause further problems or complications. So I kind of feel that we as passengers, and someone who actually flies quite often for work, should also get some kind of training on how to respond in a crisis situation, especially when the flight is on fire or something is going on.
Ivan, I imagine you're a frequent flyer as well. Do you still listen to the safety briefing?
Well, I think those of us who travel frequently know it by heart, but I actually do, and especially attentive to the exits. And I think here we were all in all, because you do have to listen to those who are in charge.
Many thanks for being guests on this edition of Weekend. Ivan Vejvoda and Arzu Gebula. Hope you can come again on the programme before too long. Thank you very much to you for listening, and enjoy the rest of your weekend if you can, from the whole team here on this edition. Bye-bye. See you soon.